All right, this 4 o'clock hour, we discussed Georgia and their matchup with Clemson. Yesterday, we spotlighted Clemson. Of course, we had Baylor coach Dave Aranda for their opener coming up Saturday in San Marcos. Now joined again by Pete Sampson, covers Notre Dame for theathletic.com, has been with us before and joins us again because they have a hell of a game coming up against Florida State. Pete, it's not what Florida State's been used to, of course, but they're getting used to what it's not very good the last few years. What does Notre Dame expect from FSU and Mike Norvell another year as the head coach?
I mean, they saw him last year, so I think they sort of saw that rebuild. It's a big rebuild up close. So, I mean, there's athletic ability at quarterback. I like Jordan Travis, what he did against Notre Dame last year, but, it's like their defense was so bad, and Notre Dame was really sort of able to run at will against them that it's difficult to look at that and feel like they're going to take such a big jump from year one to year two, at least in week one, I just don't expect Florida State to have the horses necessarily keep up out of the gate.
Pete, that game last year, I'm an FSU grad. Watching that game, I was talking to a friend of mine, and like the fact that it was like only 20 points or 24 at the end of the game was like, well, that could have been much worse. It could have been like the Clemson game was a year ago. For Notre Dame, though, how much are they really changing anything that would concern Florida State at all? Because they're probably just going to run right at them and not put too much on Jack Coan, are they?
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they actually did put quite a bit on Jack Coan, because Notre Dame is not built to run on Florida State like they were last year with that offensive line with 4 guys who were in NFL camps, 3 draft picks, Tommy Tremble paving the way. I mean, Notre Dame's run game is not going to be as devastating as it was last year, but they do think that at receiver, they have more ability than they did last year. Their tight end will be better. Their running backs will be better. So it's we talked about this thing last time I was on. It's sort of a team that sort of flips in terms of its construction for Notre Dame. Usually they're great on the line, but maybe a little bit limited at the skill positions. This year, I think they have potential to be great at the skill positions, but a line that's going to have to grow into the season.
What have been some of the thoughts on Jack Coan since being named the starter, just the intangibles that he brings, the style that he brings, and the belief from his teammates?
So far, they like what they've seen. He can take in a lot of offense, so I think they'll be able to be a little bit more versatile offensively. And, I mean, so much of how good or average he is at Notre Dame is going to have to do with the skill position players that he's throwing to, and he should have so much more depth than he had at Wisconsin at receiver or tight end. The running backs, not Jonathan Taylor good, but Kyron Williams is second team All-American. Chris Tyree is somebody that chose Notre Dame over Oklahoma and Alabama. So he's got a lot of weapons, and we asked him about the term game manager, which is how he was seen at Wisconsin, and he leaned into it. He was just like, well, that means I don't turn the ball over and I get you in good spots. And I'm okay with managing a game that way.
So, obviously, they've been able to now, Notre Dame, settle things down and be a part of the top 10, and they're a part of the what is near the elite. Obviously, I think most people think of Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, or whatever. How hungry is that fan base to not Notre Dame prove who they are, but get back to a level that they haven't really tasted at the elite highest level in a long time?
I mean, starving for it. They've been close, but it's like you get close and then realize how far away you are when you run into Clemson in the playoffs with freshman Trevor Lawrence. You run into Alabama with the Heisman Trophy winner last year. So it's, in closing that gap, I don't think there's anything that's going to happen in Tallahassee that's going to convince you one way or the other that it's closing. That's a recruiting issue. So it's a hungry fan base. I also think it's, Brian Kelly's in a spot now where he sort of recaptured benefit of the doubt. So if Notre Dame goes 10-2, if they don't really challenge to make the playoff into November, I'm not saying the fan base is going to be okay with that, but they're going to feel like, all right, if some freshmen step forward, if you see some more young talent, then you can feel like the program is still headed in a good direction.
On Brian Kelly, Pete, he didn't totally change his philosophy, but he changed a lot of the ways he was doing things. That's not easy for a lot of coaches to do, especially a guy who was kind of famous for being, what he was in Brian Kelly.
Yeah, I mean, I think he toned down himself on the sideline. And, when you talk about what's different about the program, it's that you sort of start with the head coach, even though he's the same guy in first and last name, his approach and how he deals with people is totally different. So is very rare in the sport. I mean, you guys know, covering it down there, it's like once you're on the hot seat, the only way you get off is when you get fired. And Brian Kelly has coached himself off of the hot seat, which is pretty impressive because you just don't see coaches reinvent themselves the way that he did.
Hey, Pete, I'm curious, off the field, what has name, image, likeness been like for Notre Dame? I mean, they're obviously a unique program, and, NIL's been something that a lot of people have been trying to wrap their head around. What's it been like in South Bend?
It's been a topic of conversation, but there has not been a whole lot of action on it. Kyle Hamilton, the star safety, has made some money off of it, has had a few apparel deals, memorabilia deals, but I think for the most part, it hasn't been that different here than other places. Your offensive line gets a sponsorship deal with a local barbecue joint. The smaller, I don't want to say smaller time stuff, but things that don't really move the needle, I think, for the fan base. They're just sort of like, oh, that's it. I've heard a lot about NIL, how it's going to blow up the entire sport. And, now the starting left tackle gets free ribs. Like, that's just not that big of a deal.
We brought this up earlier. Nebraska had to buy some tickets, probably thousands of tickets, to keep their home sellout streak alive, which is some insane number. Notre Dame had one themselves that was in the nearly 300 level. I think it's 273 or so in a row. When they finally had that streak end, did anyone care?
Yeah, I mean, people cared because it was something that went in your recruiting brochures that you had sold out every game since the 70s. But I mean, they were running into the same things that Nebraska was running into, where you're asking alums to buy the tickets, and it's like, is it a sellout, or are you just saying it's a sellout? And Notre Dame sort of viewed it as like, look, we get it. You get 80,000 people to South Bend in late November for a game against Georgia Tech or Duke or Navy is hard. They have some games at the end of the season. They sort of viewed it as like, whenever you have 3 home games in November, selling out those 3 home games was going to be very, very difficult. And that turned out to be one of the reasons it ended. It just, the scheduling broke against them in terms of home games and, just having too many tickets to sell it in cold weather in the upper Midwest.
Pete, what would have to happen this week for Florida State to win this game?
Jack Coan would have to be really bad. I think that he would have to sort of go out and do something that he has not done all camp and really just sort of lay an egg. I think their offensive line would have to be overwhelmed by the moment. 4 new starters, 1 transfer, 1 true freshman. I think there's some opportunity for that to happen. The offensive line to play poorly, or at least play poorly in the beginning of the game. But other than that, it's difficult for me to see, other than, your classic don't turn the ball over, that kind of formula to lose. You would need to, I think that it's the quarterback and the offensive line play. If Notre Dame is steady at both, they don't need to be spectacular, just steady. If they're steady at both, I think that they will be able to get out of Tallahassee without too much of a scare.
Did I just see you? I did. Pete Sampson on Twitter, at Pete Sampson. The Athletic is doing the Lord's work, producing a beer guide for the college football season. Brian Hamilton wrote the story. I love it, man. It's Pete Sampson, by the way, and then _ after N. That's always, there's this time of the year to kind of get a lot of those stories out, right?
Absolutely. I mean, it's like, if you're going to go on the road for college football, let's enjoy it to the maximum.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I believe the ACC one comes out on Thursday of this week, maybe Friday, but I will be checking that out since I've got trips to Tallahassee, Charlottesville, and Blacksburg on deck coming up.
Paul, what's the score for Saturday? Was it Sunday or Monday?
Sunday. It's a Sunday game.
So
Sunday.
What's the score?
Yeah, Sunday night.
Florida State alum here?
I would say if Florida State can keep it to like 42-24, like,
you
that's
think it's
a
that
great
high scoring
night.
a game?
Oh, for Notre Dame, sure. I think Florida State can probably rattle off a couple touchdowns late. I mean, when Notre Dame quits caring,
what?
I mean,
all right.
Okay. I don't think it's going to be good. I mean, we'll see if McKenzie Milton makes a difference, Pete, but I just don't. That defense has to get, they got 2 transfers. They need about 12 more.
Yeah, I do think it's difficult for me to figure out the Jermaine Johnson, the kid from Georgia, unless he is just unbelievable and terrorizes Notre Dame's freshman left tackle Blake Fisher. That's why I say just be steady against Florida's defensive line. That's all. If you can just do that, then I think Notre Dame will be fine. I think it'll be a little more low scoring than you think, but I think Notre Dame's offense is going to need some time to grow into it, whatever its ultimate form is this season. To see them come out and be lights out on week one, I think it's probably asking a little bit too much.
Sunday night, 6:30, ABC. Thanks for your time. We appreciate it. Pete Sampson covers Notre Dame with us from theathletic.com on Sikkim 365 Radio.
Yeah, nothing realignment-wise to bring up with him this time around because there's been, nothing really going on. I mean, really the Big 12 has gone behind closed doors now, and they're meeting today, obviously, and I'm sure they're talking about a lot of different things, but that's certainly got to be one of the topics, if not the topic, I would think, from that meeting, and don't know what comes out of that, but certainly if you're Notre Dame, I know they were a trendy team to start talking about, pushing them into the ACC full-time and all of that, but they're not budging. They're not going anywhere.
They're their own alliance.
Yeah,
they just are. I mean, so they don't have to worry about it until they have to worry about it. Bottom line, again, no team watches this with more giddiness than Notre Dame does because they're just
we're fine.
They're fine. They'll take phone calls, not make phone calls.
Right,
that's
exactly.
what they can sit there and just
they're allowed to push decline if they want to.
Yeah. I mean, look, Bob Bowlesby has to answer every call on his phone. Every one. Look, George Kliavkoff has to answer most of the calls on his phone. Kevin Warren's probably less than that, and Jim Phillips, about the same place right now. But, Jack Swarbrick, the AD at Notre Dame, he gets to make calls. Yeah. I mean, he doesn't have to take them. He just, hey, we'd like to play you. When? We have an opening in 2038. You down? Okay, good deal. 2038 and 2039, we're doing it.
Yeah, we'll be in the same conference, the independent conference, so to speak.
There is a ton of